everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Better Buildings, Better Plants Summit. I'm really excited to kick things off here today with our commercial sector meetup. And for the first time, we've actually joined all of our sectors under commercial, which is commercial real estate, healthcare, hospitality, higher ed, and retail, food service, and grocery. So thank you all so much for joining, and I'm really looking forward to having the many industry partners that we have speaking today, and then of course, some time for Q&A discussion. So if you can go to the next slide, please. You are in the right place if you have come here for the commercial sector meetup. But before we dive in, I do want to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. The first thing is that today's session will be recorded and archived on the Better Buildings Solutions Center. So we'll be able to follow up with a recording and slides from today where you can click on links and revisit and all that good stuff. Additionally, today, all of our attendees are in listen-only mode, which means that you can't unmute yourself. But stay tuned because we still have plenty of ways where you can interact with us and our panelists. If you do experience any audio or video or visual issues or tech issues, please just send a message into the chat window in Zoom, which is in the bottom right. I think probably most of us are familiar with that by now, but put a note in there and we'll get it worked out as soon as we can. All right, next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah Debelius, and I'm a fellow in the Building Technologies Office at the Department of Energy. And normally I get to work with the commercial real estate and higher education sectors as part of Better Buildings. And I also wear the hats of working with our waste reduction pilot as well as the low carbon pilot. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So Cedar.
Thanks, Hannah, and hi, everyone. I'm Cedar Blazik, and I am the DOE lead for retail, food service, and grocery sectors of Better Buildings.
Thanks, Cedar. Mariana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana Ejea Casalduk. I am an ORISE Science, Technology, and Policy Fellow like Hannah in the Commercial Building Integrations team that is within the Building Technologies Office here at DOE. I am the lead for the Better Buildings Healthcare sector, and I am the new lead for the Hospitality sector. So it's a pleasure to meet you all and connect with those that I've already met.
Awesome. Thanks, Mariana. We can go to the next slide. So we've got a lot to get into today, but before I actually even jump into the agenda, I would first like to give a very heartfelt congratulations to two goal achievers within the commercial sector. The University of Nebraska Medical Center is a goal achiever in water this year, and Walgreens is a goal achiever in energy. So congratulations. We are excited to see more about our goal achievers in the opening plenary just after this, but it's really amazing and incredible impact, especially considering the last year that we've had to achieve your goal. So congratulations. Today, we of course are starting with a little bit of welcome and introductions, which we've already gotten into, but then we're actually going to be going into some rapid fire presentations on 4 different topics, which are carbon and greenhouse gas accounting, efficiency and resilience, the pandemic and COVID-19, of course, and diversity, equity, inclusion. And we have a strong mix of DOE staff, some industry partners, and some Better Building partners. So we'll hear a lot of different perspectives. And then at the end, you'll have time to interact with all of those speakers and panelists that we have today through a lot of time dedicated to Q&A. So we can go to the next slide, please. This is the part I mentioned about still getting to interact with us, which is that this year and today we're going to be using an interactive platform that's called Slido. And we'll be using this platform for both Q&A and also some polling questions to engage you all. So right now, if you could open either your mobile device or another browser on your computer and go to www.slido.com, then you're going to enter the event code DOE, which you see here on the screen. And then you'll have the opportunity to choose from a dropdown this session. So this session, again, is called the Commercial Sector Meetup. So just to review, right now, you should open up your phone or another browser, go to slido.com. The event code is DOE, and then you're going to choose from the dropdown Commercial Sector Meetup. So I'm just going to give a couple of moments for us all to do that. I know that it's, can be a lot for a different browser, but this is what we're going to use for polling and also for Q&A. So it's, if you have it up, then you'll be able to interact with us and our panelists, and it'll create a much more robust session for you. Great. And again, if you have any questions or confusion or issues, you can use the Zoom chat function to interact with one of our technical assistance people for AV. I see something in the chat, so I'm hoping our tech assistants can do that. The event code is DOE, and then it should be a drop-down, and you can find the commercial sector meetup from the drop-down. If you're already in a thing and it looks confusing, on the top left, it'll tell you which session you're in. So you might need to reevaluate in the top left and choose commercial sector meetup again. All right, well, we are gonna give it a go for those of you that are able to make it into Slido. And so if we could please launch our first poll. This is an easy question for you, but it'll help you get set up and using Slido. Great, so the first question is, what sector are you from? So I'll give it a moment for you to tell us about that. All right, excellent. All right, this is great. We have at least somebody from all of our commercial sectors in Better Buildings, which is awesome. Not surprisingly, a lot of commercial real estate. Glad to have you on board. Some government staff. I saw higher education down there, healthcare and hospitality. All right, excellent. We are going to be using this poll at the beginning of each of our 4 rapid fire sections. So, you know, keep this browser open because we're going to be doing more polls to launch all of that. Excellent, thanks so much. We can go ahead and close the poll and bring up our panelists again because I'm looking forward to introducing them. And again, one last plug, if you're having AV issues, you can put your question into the chat and we should be able to help you out there. All right, so these are our wonderful panelists today. We are joined by Allison Blackwelder, who's the Project Manager, Advocacy and Policy at the U.S. Green Building Council. Dean Stanberry, who's the 2nd Vice Chair of the Global Board of Directors at the International Facilities Management Association. Cara Brooks, who's the Sustainability Program Manager for the American Society for Healthcare Engineering. Kirby Brendsel, who's the Assistant Vice President, Sustainability and ESG at Welltower. Nikita Radhakrishnan, who's a Technical Advisor and Research Engineer at Pacific Northwest National Lab. And Mary Statz, who's the Program Director for Energy Management and Sustainability at UW Health. So as you can see, we have a lot of sectors covered, and I'm looking forward to diving in with that. So with that, we are going to go back and kick off a carbon section, which is our first, with some polls. So if we could bring our first poll back up. Again, you're going to go to slido.com. The event code is DOE, and then you can choose commercial sector meetup. I'm also seeing in the chat that after you put in DOE, there is a join button that you hit before choosing the commercial sector meetup. And with that, we can go ahead and launch our first poll, which is about carbon. We are wondering if you are tracking carbon or greenhouse gas emissions, what scopes are you covering? And this is one where you can select all that apply. And we know that a majority of our partners are tracking this. And so we're really curious to know if it's just operational, if you're including, other scopes, such as scope 3 would include, waste or transportation and travel and that sort of thing. All right, so most people, it looks like, are tracking scope 1 and 2, which makes sense. Mostly for scope 2, which is that operational and purchased electricity. All right, so that's interesting. We have about a quarter of people who are tracking, it maybe at least something, who are not tracking. Could you scroll down for me, Kendall, and show me who is tracking scope 3? Okay, about 18%. So maybe a fifth of people then who are tracking scope 3, which is really interesting. And 15%-ish for women scope 3. All right, thank you. Well, I hope that resonates with some of you. We can go to our next poll, which is what emissions tracking or reporting frameworks are you using if you're tracking this? And this is just an open-ended question, so you can let us know. But I know from speaking with a lot of you that some common ones, the greenhouse gas protocol, you might be doing it for science-based targets or to report to GREB. Okay, the climate registry, Energy Star, of course, I know a lot of our partners are using Portfolio Manager, also not just for energy, but also for greenhouse gas emissions. WRI's greenhouse gas protocol, which I know is a standard for a lot of the other ones as well. Yeah, and measurable is definitely a common tool that we've been hearing to report to GRES and also to report to other frameworks as well. Energy Watch, that's interesting. I've not heard of that one, but interested to learn more. All right, excellent. I'm seeing a lot of these similar answers. Energy Star, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, GRES, Energy Star, all rising to the top, which is what we've been hearing. All right. Excellent. Well, as you all can continue to put some answers in there. Oh, that's fine. So thank you so much for sharing that. Before I turn it over to our speakers who are going to share about carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, I did just want to mention two topics that are better buildings related within this space. The first is that a lot of you probably know that we've launched a low carbon pilot. And you can see who has joined us in that effort so far in our opening plenary, although I am looking at our names here and I know a lot of you who have joined the low carbon pilot are on the phone with us today. But that pilot has asked partners in Better Buildings to commit to specific existing buildings to pursue low or no carbon over the next 2 years. And through that effort, they'll be working directly with us and our technical assistance experts at the lab in order to achieve those goals and to really make tangible progress in carbon reduction. It's not too late to join a low carbon. If you're interested, you can still join for about another month. You just reach out to your regular Better Buildings contacts of your account manager and sector lead to do that. And I'm really excited that over the next 2 years, we'll also have the opportunity to package and share a lot of those solutions that are coming out of the low carbon pilot. In all the usual ways that you come to Better Buildings for, whether that's through webinars or solutions and showcase projects and that sort of thing. I also want to throw out there that, with this low carbon pilot and, knowing that so many of our partners are already tracking their greenhouse gas emissions, and as we just saw, tracking a lot of operational emissions and using all those different frameworks. This is also something that Better Buildings is exploring right now. And we're interested to hear from partners, what your experience is in tracking greenhouse gas emissions. And if you were to join at the portfolio level with Better Buildings, something in regards to a carbon commitment, what that might look like. So we're interested in having those conversations with you. Again, you can reach out to your Better Buildings contact, or if you've not joined Better Buildings yet and you are tracking carbon or thinking about it, it could be a great time to join. And all of our contact information will be available on the last slide of this presentation, which will, again, be on the Better Buildings Solution Center, so you can reach out to us. We'd love to have those conversations. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to our first rapid fire panelist here. I'll be joined by Allison Blackwelder from the U.S. Green Building Council. Allison serves as the project manager on the advocacy and policy team of the U.S. Green Building Council. And in this role, she advocates for federal, state, and local level policies that are supportive of USGBC tools, including LEED, as well as enhanced resilience, efficiency, and sustainability of the built environment in general. And USGBC is one of our Better Buildings affiliates. So thanks so much. And Allison, please share with us on the topic of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. My name is Allison Blackwelder, and I'm part of the advocacy team at the U.S. Green Building Council. Today, I'm going to discuss USGBC's newest certification program, LEED Zero. We'll explore the critical role of data in helping business owners establish and track progress across net zero goals, and discuss how third-party certification provides credibility to net zero claims. I'll speak a little about ARC, our global benchmarking and reporting platform for buildings and portfolios, and LEED Zero, and how they can be leveraged as tools for sustainable market transformation. At USGBC, our goal is to transform the buildings industry to enable a healthy and prosperous future for all. We know that better buildings equal better lives. Our most successful tool for market transformation is the LEED Green Building Rating System, which many of you have heard of, which has certifications for new building projects, interior tenant design and construction, and existing buildings operation and maintenance. The buildings and buildings construction sectors combined are responsible for over one third of global final energy consumption and nearly 40% of total direct and indirect CO2 emissions. The building industry has an opportunity and a responsibility to reduce its resource use and advance sustainable regenerative communities. As we've been tracking data on the global building sector, especially since the Paris Agreement, we see that buildings are not where they need to be, not yet on a path to reduced warming scenarios. On the positive side, the energy use intensity of buildings continues to come down by about 1.5% per year. But energy demand from buildings and building construction continues to rise, driven by improved access to energy in developing countries, greater ownership and use of energy consuming devices, and rapid growth in global buildings floor area. So we've seen a jump in net zero pledges over the last 5 years, but without a clear understanding of where actors are starting out and detailed implementation plans for getting to zero, it can be difficult to determine the real ambition and impact of net zero pledges. So important things to remember coming from there: transparency enables accountability and positive pressure to translate targets to ambitious action. Data tracking is critical for the real estate sector to define baseline performance, set targets, and report on progress. And third-party certification programs such as LEED can help real estate owners easily communicate their building's performance and lend credibility to net zero claims. So LEED Zero. USGBC launched LEED Zero in 2018. LEED rating systems focus on holistic sustainability performance and provide a foundation for teams to design for and operate high-performing green buildings. LEED Zero builds on a holistic LEED ND or EB certification by recognizing buildings operating at net zero. The program aims to inspire action and greater achievement of net zero goals during building operations. We are offering 4 distinct net zero certifications: LEED Zero Energy, LEED Zero Water, LEED Zero Waste, and LEED Zero Carbon, which we're focusing on today. Each certification verifies achievement of net zero goals over the last 12 months of building operation. LEED Zero Carbon recognizes buildings operating with a net zero carbon emissions over the course of the past year. LEED Zero Carbon addresses the balance of carbon emitted from energy consumption and occupant transportation to carbon emissions avoided or offset. Carbon emitted is a result of energy and transportation, and occupant transportation can be responsible for as much as operational carbon emissions as building energy use in some projects. So it's important to recognize that source of scope 3 emissions in the program. Carbon avoided can include on-site renewable energy generation, off-site renewable energy procurement, and if necessary, the purchase of carbon credits. Our LEED Zero program guide is now available on our LEED Zero website, and it explains how projects should prepare to achieve certification and provides a breakdown of the LEED Zero carbon balance, LEED Zero energy balance, and LEED Zero water balance. For all certifications, projects enter resource consumption data in the ARC platform. ARC is a sustainability performance platform that all projects can use to benchmark their consumption of resources and track improvements over time. ARC is free and available to all projects, and LEED projects use ARC to report their performance data. As a developer of a global green building certification program and as a real estate professional, it's difficult for USGBC to overstate the importance of robust and accurate data in helping ensuring a net zero carbon future. Legislative landscapes and technological advancements vary across regions, but data or numbers is a global language that can transcend boundaries and language barriers. Cities, states, and countries need data in order to report on nationally determined emission targets and verify performance claims. The ARC platform enables buildings to track resource consumption across a portfolio of buildings. Having a centralized repository for building portfolio data gives owners and operators the information needed to benchmark the performance of each asset. So LEED Zero, again, we have about 20 LEED Zero certified projects at this time and more than 20 additional projects registered. The first LEED Zero carbon building is the LEED O&M Platinum certified Hantergy Renewable Energy Center project in China. This is an all-solar green building featuring Hanergy's own thin film solar modules on the top and sides of the building and handbrick on the walkway. We don't have any slides for this particular part of the presentation, but I can follow up if you have any specific questions about these projects I'm speaking about. But I just wanted to give you a mental picture. Another exemplary project I should mention is the Colgate-Palmolive facility in Burlington, New Jersey. It's the first project in the world to receive LEED Net Zero certification in all 4 categories: carbon, energy, water, and waste. To accomplish this, they demonstrated net zero carbon emissions from energy consumption and occupant transportation, either avoided or offset, a source energy use balance of 0, and a potable water use balance of 0, all over a period of 12 months. Additionally, they had to earn true zero waste certification at the platinum level. And all of this is in addition to their LEED silver certification. So 3 key messages to remember, just as takeaways from LEED Zero here. Net zero goals help inspire action and greater achievement. Data reporting and tracking underpins all robust implementation plans and credible net zero claims. And third-party verification of performance helps real estate owners and asset managers make claims about performance and showcases leadership. And that's all for me today, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Allison. And just as a reminder for everyone, you can use the Q&A and Slido anytime, and you can both input questions in there, and also you can click the little like button on it, it's the thumbs up, and that'll move questions that you like up to the top for our panelists, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So just a reminder, anytime you can put a question there. With that, I'm excited to introduce Mary Statz, who leads energy management and sustainability at the UW Health System, which serves more than 600,000 patients each year throughout the Midwest region. In her position, Mary is responsible for the corporate vision and strategy to make UW Health a more environmentally friendly enterprise. So Mary, please take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, great. So thank you for having me. So Hannah just gave you a little bit of background on UW Health. UW Health is governed by the UW Hospital and Clinics Authority Board, and we partner with the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health, the School of Nursing and Pharmacies to fulfill our mission of advancing health without compromise. Every major medical and health association in the United States has declared climate change a public health emergency, including the American Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Health Association. So our goal is for UW Health, the UW-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health, the UW-Madison School of Nursing, and the UW-Madison School of Pharmacy to acknowledge that climate change is a public health emergency and collectively commit to achieving net zero carbon emissions. We are currently in the process of developing a net zero plan across all 3 scopes. We have collaborated with our partners in the UW-Madison Sustainability Department since the academic pieces really fall under their purview. We have met with the Dean for the School of Medicine and Public Health, who chairs UW Health's Board of Directors, and we presented our case to him. We have his full support and the support of his leadership team, and we're in the process of scheduling meetings with the deans of the School of Nursing and the Schools of Pharmacy for their input. Since this is a public health issue, we think it's important for our health sciences partners to be aligned with us on this goal. Once we have our health sciences partners on board, we will present this to our CEO. And in the meantime, we have been meeting with our Vice President of Population Health and our Vice President of Facilities and Support Services for their advice on our strategy as we get ready for our CEO presentation in the coming months. Healthcare has really been a leader throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we are emerging from this public health crisis, I believe we can be leaders on the climate change crisis by addressing our own significant climate footprint and climate impacts. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mary. That's really interesting about, I don't have the benefit, of course, of working as closely with healthcare as my colleague Mariana, and that's a really interesting connection between the public health emergency and climate change. It seems very relevant. So thank you so much to Mary and Allison, to both of you. As a reminder, you can use Slido for Q&A at any time and then upvote the questions that are most interesting to you. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Cedar to address efficiency and resilience.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah. To kick off this topic, we are going to launch a poll and get some feedback from you all, from everyone, regarding the efficiency resilience nexus. So if you haven't already, go to slido.com, enter the code DOE, and select the commercial sector meetup from the drop-down menu on the top right. In 1 to 2 words, what projects or themes are you exploring at the efficiency resilience nexus? We would love to hear from you. You know, hopefully the answer is not nothing, but I'm curious to see what you all are working on. Updating floodplain guidance, interesting. Lots of solar and storage. Microgrids, solar, batteries, some electrification in there. Great, more PV. All right, so some themes emerging. You can see the ones that are typed in the most are, you know, definitely focused on solar, PV, as well as microgrids and storage, having backup power. For me, that's really at the crux of efficiency and resiliency and how these concepts all tie in. All right, we'll let you keep adding your words in there, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into this overview. And thank you for participating in our polls. It's really helpful. So sustainability, energy efficiency, and resilience all play a critical role in ensuring today's businesses and buildings meet the needs of both customers and employees. Incorporating resilient building design and infrastructure greatly influences an organization's ability to anticipate, absorb, adapt to, and rapidly recover from disruptive events. Types of disruptive events may include extreme weather events such as hurricanes, fires, or floods, as well as power outages at the building or grid level. As disruptive events become more frequent due to the pressures of global climate change, companies that own and operate buildings need to be prepared to adapt and respond, all while limiting the impact on business operations. We're seeing a number of organizations in the commercial sector prioritize resilience in their operations and risk management planning. I'd like to highlight a few key examples of resilience leadership that we've seen in the commercial sector. Healthcare organizations, as Mary mentioned, provide essential patient services and often need to ensure that their facilities and equipment can run uninterrupted, regardless of external factors. We're seeing a growing investment in microgrids and renewable energy systems for healthcare facilities. Kaiser Permanente pioneered California's first medical center microgrid at the Richmond Medical Center. This microgrid provides sustainable emergency power to critical systems in the event of a widespread outage. Additionally, Kaiser's medical office building in Santa Rosa, California became the first healthcare facility in the United States to achieve net zero status by combining energy efficient technologies like electric heat pumps and electrochromic windows with on-site renewable power. Climate change also presents a financial risk to the global economy. A number of commercial real estate investors have begun incorporating resilience into their risk mitigation strategies. This year, LBA Realty and CBRE shared strategies for developing climate risk assessments as part of our Better Buildings webinar series, which is available online. LBA Realty was able to generate property-level resilience plans to respond to their identified risks. Some retail companies provide food and essential services to communities during a prolonged power outage or extreme weather events. As an essential business, Walgreens remained fully operational throughout the pandemic and continued improving the energy efficiency of its facilities. This year, they achieved their Better Buildings Challenge goal of 20% energy use intensity reduction across their stores. Another retailer, Kohl's, worked with the National Renewable Energy Lab to complete a grid interactive efficient building value potential analysis to identify opportunities across its portfolio that could achieve deeper carbon emissions reductions, additional cost savings, and improve building resiliency. Over 400 higher education institutions have formally committed to reducing carbon emissions, and many recognize that on-site renewable energy is a key strategy to meet these goals, with the added benefit of engaging students. Some institutions are also pursuing microgrids with the ability to island, establishing a more resilient power supply to serve their students, faculty, and staff. Hospitality faced a challenging year with record low occupancy rates across the US. Lowe's Hotels & Co. was able to creatively identify opportunities to cut back on energy, water, and gas consumption during periods of lower occupancy. These flexible operational changes during these periods managed to save Lowe's roughly $7 million in energy costs without any impact on their guest experience. Better Buildings is committed to supporting commercial partners in their resilience efforts. The U.S. Department of Energy brought together a roundtable of Better Buildings partners, allies, and stakeholders to foster collaboration and guidance on emerging resilience issues. The main outcome of this work is the Resilience Roadmap. It's a set of resources and case studies that are designed to help commercial building owners develop a plan for measuring, managing, and mitigating resilience risk. I encourage you all to explore this Resilience Roadmap on the Better Buildings Solutions Center. And now I'll hand things over to my colleague, Mariana Ejea-Castelduc, to discuss the impacts of the global pandemic on commercial building energy programs.
Thanks, Cedar. Before we dive into the topic of pandemic preparedness and COVID-19, we're going to quickly launch another poll to kick off our conversation. So attendees, if you haven't already, please go to slido.com and enter the event code #DOE and select the commercial sector meetup from the drop-down menu on the top right. So here's our first poll. How will building operations change in the long term? Definitely one of the biggest questions of the moment. Many looking to find the correct answer. More automated buildings, more data, definitely more data. Remote working. AI, smarter, more grid interactive buildings. Automation control systems. Tenant engagement, rental building owners will be interested in selling energy. IoT devices, smart grid, new patterns of occupancy, flex space, more automation, indoor air quality, definitely really important, indoor air quality and HVAC. Better trained operators, big data, new thermal products. It's all great, thank you so much. Automated systems, yes. Smart systems, more as a service, more energy efficiency as a service, like I mentioned, IAQ and HVAC, real-time data, improved awareness. Owner operators will focus on smaller buildings. Yes, smaller buildings are definitely a big focus for us moving forward as well. Advanced asset management, optimization for storage and microgrid, and edge computing. Okay. Wonderful. Awesome. You're all welcome to continue to input all of those amazing comments. We can definitely see that on the back end, and that's super helpful for us to know what you guys want to see moving forward as well. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Better Buildings has done to support our partners during this very difficult time. So in order to overcome many of the challenges associated with pandemic preparedness and response, our team launched the Better Buildings COVID-19 Resource Center, which can be found on the Better Buildings Solutions Center. Here, partners can learn from the experts with resources from ASHE, EPA, DOE, and more, as well as view resources by technology type, watch webinars, or register for upcoming virtual learning opportunities with us and industry experts. In addition to this, our team also launched the Building Operations During COVID-19 webinar series. We've had national laboratory scientists, IAQ experts, and building operators join our monthly installments of this webinar series and speak to a wide variety of topics such as HVAC best practices. We had a conversation about how HVAC guidance has changed and evolved since the start of the pandemic. We know that was the big issue for many. We also talked about the energy implications of major COVID-19 risk mitigation strategies, and also how to best navigate air purification technologies. Through our check-ins and conversations with partners, as well as through informal polling, through interactions like these and informal polling through this monthly webinar series, we've learned that some of the common barriers to addressing COVID-19 and reoccupying buildings for many of our partners and others across in other sectors include insufficient knowledge and guidance on pandemic preparedness and response, shifting and changing guidance on pandemic preparedness and response, insufficient trained staff to adjust building operations, and of course, the cost to implement HVAC upgrades and IAQ measures. We've also learned that the most commonly adopted COVID-19 mitigation strategies adopted by individuals that have interacted with us and our partners include promoting social distancing and face coverings, increasing outdoor air ventilation rates, increasing filter ratings in HVAC systems, mostly upgrading to MERV 13 filters, and installing additional or portable filtration and ventilation equipment. That being said, the beauty of Better Buildings is that our inboxes are always open. So if there's a specific topic or technology any of you would like for us to have an expert address on this webinar series as you all begin to reopen your buildings safely, please let us know and we'll make sure to include that. David Landman from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories Building Technologies and Urban Systems Division will be joining us on Monday, June 21st from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss how to best monitor healthy buildings using energy management information systems, also known as EMIS by their acronym, and identify issues with ventilation, air quality, and thermal health. So keep an eye out for June's Better Buildings newsletter or visit the Better Buildings COVID-19 Resource Center to register for that installment. This has been an incredibly difficult year for all of our partners, and we very much appreciate all of the time that they take out of their busy schedules to engage with us and help us make Better Buildings a more useful and helpful experience for them. So next up, we have Dean Stanberry, who's going to be talking about this topic. Dean Stanberry is a solutions-oriented facility professional with over 25 years of broad-based experience in facilities management, real estate portfolio management, process and quality improvement, procurement, sustainability, information systems implementation, and critical environment operations. So Dean, take it away.
Thank you, Mariana. See, am I on the screen? Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, thank you. All right. As mentioned, I'm actually the second vice chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors. So IFMA is the International Facility Management Association. So it's a professional association for facility managers. We have about 23,000 members, 112 countries. And those members represent about 78 billion square feet of building space and about 526 billion of annual spending. So it's a fairly influential group of people. One of the things that happened when COVID first came about, you may remember they were trying to identify who were the essential workers. And initially, the facility managers were not in that group. And we do have some people in Washington that helped advise legislators that this was a group of people that were basically keeping those buildings not only open but functioning. I do have a day job. I work as a contractor for the General Services Administration, and so I was able to see some of that in action because not all of the federal agencies went to work from home. Not all of them can. So there's some of them that operate service centers, and those are things that they've not really moved into a work from home scenario yet. So many of the buildings that are managed by the General Service Administration had to support people in those buildings. And in the meantime, they still needed to maintain those buildings. They still needed to do the maintenance work on them to make sure that they were safe and secure the cleaning, the extra cleaning was being done. So there was a lot that went on there. There were some other things that were related that were unique to COVID. So looking at indoor air changes and how we had to change programming and things like that. Many buildings have been somewhat idle for some period of time. So as we get ready to start moving people back in, they're looking at the water flushing requirements to make sure that the water systems are clean and healthy and don't have any contaminants or things that have been built up in there. So there was a lot of things that happened over that period. One of the things that IFMA did in 2020 is we undertook a study. It was actually a Delphi study, and we called it the experts assessment. But Delphi Study essentially brings together subject matter experts from a variety of disciplines to talk about a particular topic. And what we were looking at is not the immediate return to work, but how will the pandemic change the workplace over a period of time? And that's what we were hoping to get some insights on. And we had about 250 subject matter experts from around the world, multiple disciplines, not only design, construction, facilities, real estate, HR, IT, a variety of disciplines weighing in on those topics. And the subsequent report is available. If you go to ifma.org, you can look for the knowledge library, and it is available. We also have a pandemic response center that was put in place by our IFMA staff. So they were also collecting, as Mariana mentioned, collecting any information, viable information, as well vetted as we could get in a short period of time, and making it available to our members so that they could actually respond in real time to problems that are occurring every day. Back to the Delphi study, that had some interesting results that came out of it. And as a result of that, we've actually been doing some webinars, pandemic response series. We've actually got 6 recorded already. We've got another one scheduled, I believe, next week. So if you're interested in that, again, go to the ifma.org website and go to the Knowledge Center, Knowledge Library, or search for it on YouTube and just look for the IFMA subscription on YouTube. I've participated and actually hosted a couple of those webinars, and one of them was about the effect that the pandemic return to work will have on sustainability of buildings and projects. There's a lot of speculation that the commercial occupancy will be reduced. And I believe that it will, maybe in the short term, maybe in the long term, we don't really know yet, but there will be a reduction in commercial occupancy. So some tenants will be looking to reduce the amount of space they have or consolidate into fewer spaces. And some of the speculation is that some buildings that maybe hadn't been looked at for sustainability upgrades will be looked at now, so that since they have fewer buildings to manage, that the ones that remain will get some of that money available to them. So again, we have people on site every day. They never really left. They were wearing the masks every day. Maybe I just read today that the federal government is going to start allowing vaccinated people to remove their masks. So it looks like we're starting to come out of the darkness and back into the light. For those that are interested, I'm also a bit of a climate activist. And, as we know, the climate crisis did not go away during COVID. It's been laying there kind of waiting for us to come back. So we'll have another thing to discuss for the next Better Buildings Summit on what are we doing about the climate crisis. Thank you, Mariana.
Wonderful. Up next, we have Cara Brooks. Cara Brooks is a Sustainability Program Manager for the American Society for Healthcare Engineering, also known as ASHE, A-S-H-E, a professional membership group of the American Hospital Association. Cara Brooks manages the sustainability programs and goals for the association, including the Energy to Care program. Cara has nearly 20 years of experience in energy engineering, providing professional services and program management. So Cara, if you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariana. And thank you all for having me here and to join the panel today. I'm excited to really be a part of the panel and to discuss some of the things that we're seeing out there in terms of how buildings will change long term. When the polling question came out, I took notes of really the big trends of what people are saying. Some of those included smart building technologies, automation, and data-driven. But the one piece that Mariana brought up that I think is going to be a key factor comes with the HVAC systems and in particular with ventilation. We've seen through the pandemic how this has really come to the forefront, and that it has come to the forefront for both healthcare buildings and all sorts of other commercial buildings. For healthcare facilities, all of our guidance is based around the ASHE standard 170. For other types of buildings, it's 62.1. That's great guidance. But we've seen this growing interest in the building ventilation and the effects on controlling infection. And one thing that Mariana also brought up was that there was, people automatically saw that there was an insufficient guidance on pandemic response for different types of buildings. So I wanted to kind of go through a little project that we're working on right now, and that is to come up with guidance for this type of work. So the CDC is working with a number of different partners around the country, including universities and associations, on a project called Project First Line. And the intent of the project is to create guidance around infection control that would provide training for over 6 million frontline healthcare workers. ASHE is a partner on that project, and we're developing guidance around ventilation. The guidance that we're working on is actually geared toward a number of different audiences. Everything from the clinician who may or may not be in a healthcare facility, the technician or the facility manager within a commercial building, or even the facility director for a hospital. So as a partner, we are developing the guidance to really hopefully help in the next pandemic with having that guidance and understanding what to do. The guidance that we're creating with the CDC is really looks at the how, for one thing, which is how to convert a space, and even what questions need to be asked. If I'm a clinician, if I am a pediatrician in a downtown commercial building in Chicago, what do I need to ask in order to work with patients in my space who could potentially be COVID positive or other types of infectious disease? And then also, what types of spaces even need to be converted? Do we need to convert to negative air pressure? Things like that. The other thing that we're looking at is the why. And that provides the background on why we're doing and developing and helping us develop the understanding around that effort. It could obviously include things like for medical office space, commercial buildings, questions a provider might ask the facility technician or the facility manager or building engineer in a large building. And it's important to know that as we move forward and we start to look at this guidance, that we really weigh how practicality and science, the science of infection control work together. As an example, does it make sense to put a HEPA machine in an elementary school classroom? Well, we heard like early on that ventilation was going to be the thing, negative pressure, but that's not really a practical use for that because it can be very noisy and you have a teacher trying to speak over a machine and you have kids trying to in that atmosphere. So I think as we move forward, we really need to look at what makes sense with that, with the science of ventilation rates and evacuating infection. And also, how does that tie into energy efficiency? Obviously, if you're ventilating spaces more, the conditioning that is required to keep the spaces comfortable could increase energy use. A lot of questions have come in about, did we see that? Early on, we didn't necessarily, because many hospitals had really evacuated a lot of their normal patients and normal patient flow. But it is a big question, and I think the trend was, yes, we did see energy use go up. We also need to really weigh against the goals toward decarbonization of buildings and our reliance on fossil fuels for thermal loads. And we need to take a look at, and I know the labs, I'm sure the labs are working on this. I know the CDC has a variety of projects where we're just looking at what that ventilation is, how that affects these systems, and really growing our standards and codes and having them completely based on science. So I really think that I've seen it, I've heard it, that ventilation is definitely a key factor. I'm excited to say that we're working with the CDC on guidance around that, but it is something to keep in mind, especially as we look at decarbonizing buildings. So thanks, Mariana.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cara. I see a lot of questions in the chat about the resources. Just know that after we wrap up this conversational and discussion portion, you're going to see a list of all of the links that you need to check out in order to learn more about everything that we're talking about here today. So now I'm going to guide us into the diversity, equity, and inclusion discussion for today. So in order to do that, I'm going to launch a poll and request feedback from everyone regarding this topic. So attendees, again, if you haven't already, please go to slido.com and enter the code #DOE and select commercial sector meetup from the drop-down menu on the top right. So here is our first poll. What is the focus of your organization's internal or external DEI efforts? We know that some people hyper-focus on certain areas, so we want to know what those are. So right now we have 60% reporting that they're 54% reporting that they're really focusing on workforce development. We have long-term strategic planning. Ooh, that just came up to the top. We have, my organization is not pursuing DEI. We have workplace safety. These are moving very rapidly, but thank you again for your participation. Okay, so first we have workforce development, then we have long-term strategic planning, workplace safety and DEI training at 34%, organization's mission, 29%. Can we scroll down? Community engagement and outreach at 24%. Stakeholder engagement and outreach at 23%. Awesome. Thank you all so much. This is very helpful for us. Can we scroll back to the top, see if anything's changed? You know, workforce development is still #1. And I know that for us here at DOE, workforce development is a huge, huge focus moving forward. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts and interacting with us through Slido. So I think now I can introduce our first speaker. So starting off this very important conversation is Nikita Radhakrishnan. Nikita is a technical advisor for the Building Technologies Office at the U.S. Department of Energy and a research engineer at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, where she is on loan to BTO. She is also the diversity, equity, and inclusion lead for BTO and helps with improving the diversity of BTO's research partner base. So Nikita, if you're ready, please feel free to take that away.
Thanks, Mariana. I'm a research engineer. I work with building automation, building energy management systems at Pacific Northwest National Lab, and right now on loan to BTO. But today here, I'm in my capacity as the DEI lead for BTO this year, and I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. So we heard about all the enormous energy challenges we have for the 125 million buildings we have in the US. And it is hard to achieve our goals as it is. And at BTO, we recognize that we can't do it unless we are inclusive of the views, backgrounds, and expertise of very diverse set of players. So a couple of years ago, we started asking new questions at the office. We asked questions like, who's not represented at the table for everything that BTO does, be it research projects or any event we host. What is the gender breakdown of our participants? Who are we partnering with year after year? Who else could we partner with? And where should we be present so that others know we exist and want to collaborate? So we started asking these questions, talking to a ton of internal and external folks, and having honest conversations around representation. And this led to the formation of a DEI working group for the office. And this constituted of folks who were particularly interested in spending some time on these issues at the office. The working group came up with a DEI strategic plan for BTO. And I saw in the poll that a lot of people were interested in long-term strategic plans. So the plan lays out a few milestones and activities to be tracked by the office. So for example, the first thing on there is the need for a DEI lead, someone who is required to carry out the rest of the activities in the strategic plan. And that's where I come in. I'm the DEI lead for BTO this year, and I'm required to spend a fixed amount of hours on DEI activities for the office. As part of this effort, we're also participating in a ton of minority student-focused internships and fellowships to bring in diverse voices into the office. And a couple of examples for that, the Minorities Educational Institution Student Partnership Program. By being part of this program, we are able to host minority students for a 10-week summer internship at BTO. From this year onwards, we are also part of the GEM Fellowship in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Lab. And that program recruits high-quality, underrepresented students to pursue master's and doctoral degrees in STEM. And they get paid summer internships with BTO. So it's a win-win. From last year, we have entered into a new partnership initiative with the MSRDC. So that stands for Minority Serving Institution, MSI, Research and Development Consortium. It is, so the agreement is basically a unique funding vehicle that allows MSIs to directly negotiate research awards with DOE. And this way we get to form new working relationships with faculty at these institutions and bring their diverse voices in. So those are a few of the external facing activities. Then there are a few purely internal activities around DEI too. We are doing training and having regular discussion on DEI topics so that we are always thinking about these opportunities. We are looking more closely at our hiring processes and expanding outreach for them through alumni networks or any other services that DOE can leverage. We're also incorporating DEI considerations in individual staff work plans. So we assist individual staff members to consider DEI when they're setting goals and milestones for their programs for the year. And of course, we'll be tracking everything we're doing. We'll be taking a strategic plan, reassessing at the end of each year, and setting new goals for ourselves for the following year. And the hope is that we see our metrics improving, the diversity of the office and the stakeholders improve with it. And with that comes a better understanding of technology challenges and market barriers that leads to better innovation and creativity for building energy efficiency for the products, better homes, better buildings across all market demographics for a clean energy future. And that's our goal. That's it from me on DEI.
Oops. Okay, now, thank you so much, Nikita, for giving us all of that incredible information. So now I am going to pass things on to Kirby Brendsel. Kirby Brendsel leads Welltower's strategic sustainability, environmental, social, and governance policy initiatives, also known as ESG initiatives. Welltower Inc. is a real estate investment trust. Previously, Mr. Brendsel consulted for Deloitte, where he assisted in the creation of Deloitte's Federal Sustainability Practice and Diversity and Inclusion Program. Mr. Brendsel's other past roles include active duty service as a military intelligence corps major in the U.S. Army. So Kirby, please feel free to take it away.
Thanks, I appreciate it, Mariana. And thank you to the DOE Better Buildings for having us here today. Really appreciate it. So building off of what Nikita said, just wanted to share a little bit about our journey around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and give some thoughts around how you set it up from a strategic perspective. So thinking strategically, like thinking about like, how do you start this within your organization? It's best done by kind of starting at the beginning and doing an all-inclusive organizational strategy. So that really addresses things like a challenge, like your challenge on making connections and building a sense of community within a complex organization, like many of ours are, severely matrixed, you know, one of those types of things. This really allows you to best represent organization and employees, like based regardless of factors such as the size or the composition or other things along those lines for the organization. But an approach, like really thinking about how you could do this, really starts with expanding your networks really beyond offices, functions, teams, etc. Very similar to what Nikita was talking about, how you tried to build those up, like just not, you know, siloed into any one area. You really try to connect people of different interests, of similar backgrounds, to try and see how they can kind of go from there. And then you really work to enable everyone within the organization to establish communities that represent their backgrounds, their interests, as well as allowing anyone, and that's anyone within the organization, to really kind of contribute and share. That's what you want to work for. Now, I mean, how is this really the strategy kind of made concrete within an organization? So bottom line, just the one kind of key takeaway or one kind of thing to really think about when you're thinking on this is it takes multiple resources, departments, and tools to really make it happen. One of my favorite resources, and one of the ones that we've looked at before in terms of how we come up with this, is Demara Plummer came up with what I believe is one of the best illustrations of this, and it's called Going Plaid. And it's integrating diversity into a business strategy, structures, and systems. And really how she does this, it's almost like, I wish I could show you the slides, it's a little tough on this, it's like horizontal and vertical, so it kind of looks like a plaid. But in looking at this, you take ideas and considerations from multiple fronts to bring everything together. So for example, on the horizontal, you think about things like talent acquisition, talent management, contemporary work design, leadership performance, globalization, and balance it with HR, operations, education, and business development. And then on the verticals, you really kind of take the intersection with aspects like employee resource groups, business resource groups, employee network groups, whatever you'd like to call them, affinity networks, diversity recruitment strategies. And while we may be more familiar with kind of the horizontals that have been deployed here, those are ones we've had in the past. The verticals are newer, but they're really kind of rising in the forefront. And that's really what we'd like to endeavor to share a little bit more about. Just remember, like the biggest key takeaway from that is that it takes much work working together to build a robust D&I structure and strategy. But so what might that look like? What does it look like within an organization? I think Nikita's is a perfect example of that as well. But really, in thinking about how this looks in practice, I'll share a little bit in terms of examples of what we've done at Welltower to support our solid foundation on diversity and inclusion, which includes things like we've started over the past 18 months. We went from 1 employee network group to where now we have over 9. And so these are things like our core, our women's network, which was the first one. And it was kind of like the stepping stone or the cornerstone to really kind of allow us to build further. And we've added to those employee network groups from there with things like African American, Hispanic, LGBTQI+, veterans, and young professionals. And just to show that all of these are open to all of our employees, I'm even a part of our young professionals network. So they're open and inclusive to everyone within the organization. We've done things like training programs. So really kind of working to do things around like unconscious bias training and civil and respectful treatment. We've done things like recruiting. So making sure that we've expanded recruiting to include historically black colleges and universities to make sure that we have a diverse slate of candidates, really reviewing things along those lines. We've had extensive work on partnerships. So these are things working with national organizations and partners to really kind of discuss things around equity, diversity, and inclusion and ways in which we might continue to evolve. And then just that huge internal espousal of diversity. So things like making sure that, you know, our leadership and our senior leaders really kind of are looking like and reflecting, and we're practicing what we're preaching as far as diversity. But we continue to build in terms of how we look at equity, diversity, and inclusion all the time. So these include things like we've recently worked to launch our Foundation 2.0. So the Welltower Foundation, to have a focus that has been much more myopic around equity, diversity, inclusion, and has been employee-based. So what are the things that our employees want to focus on around this topic, and where can we match their monies from the foundation? And that's really it. Just once again, thanks for having me here today. Looking forward to questions, and as anything comes up, please feel free to type it in the chat, and look forward to discussing further. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kirby, and also to all of our panelists and speakers. I really appreciate your willingness to try out this new format with us, which was, as you all could tell, without slides, and just working on that and sharing your quick different perspectives on some of the trends that we've seen really rise to the top this year. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to be moving into our Q&A session, so it's not too late to submit questions for any of our panelists there. And again, you can also click the like button, which is a thumbs up, to move things to the top of the list. So thank you so much for bringing those up. And I believe the first question, and actually, if all of our panelists, if you haven't already, could turn on your cameras, as well as my DOE colleagues, that would be wonderful, so we could see your faces. The first question I think I'm actually going to direct to my DOE colleague, Cedar, which is that someone is very interested in the best ways to upgrade or retrofit a commercial building for grid interactivity. Cedar.
Thanks. I think that's a great question and a really key resilience strategy when we're talking about the efficiency resilience nexus. I would strongly encourage all of you to attend our roundtable discussion later this afternoon on building decarbonization. I think grid interactivity is going to be a huge role in that. And I will say there will be an announcement this afternoon about the publication of a document that I think is going to be incredibly helpful. It's a grid interactive efficient buildings roadmap. And in that document, you'll be able to find guides around commercially available grid interactive technologies, including smart thermostats, smart connected water heaters, and automated window shading attachments, as well as other technologies that might have limited availability or available in pilot forms, such as dynamic glazing, advanced controls for lighting, and HVAC integrated with thermal energy storage. So please attend that session and keep an eye out for that publication.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cedar. Do any of our panelists, by any chance, want to weigh on that before I move to the next question? I told everyone they'd have the opportunity. Great. Wonderful. So the next question is, what trends in commercial buildings that came up as part of the pandemic are here to stay versus a temporary change? So maybe I'll open it up first to one of our panelists, either Dean or Cara, who spoke about the pandemic, but I really think anyone on our panel could also jump in after them to talk about this.
Well, Hannah, I
So
do
Dean
have
great.
one thought. So prior to the pandemic, most commercial buildings, if they had a business continuity, disaster recovery, or pandemic plan, it was gathering dust in the drawer. It was usually delegated down to some mid-level of the organization who had absolutely no authority to go out and try to test those plans across all the different departments. And so I think there's going to be a renewed interest in maintaining a workable disaster recovery business continuity plan going forward, at least for a decade or so, until everybody forgets, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's interesting, Dean. And Dean, that question did remind me of a conversation I think we had earlier this year, and you talked a little bit about it of, facilities managers, really transitioning and leaning into the role of essential employees. And I think, at least for me, when I'm speaking to you, that's another thing that I feel like is, at least for the foreseeable future, unreversible, really. Like, that is the way I think that so many people have come to rely on facilities managers in their buildings.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just add to that. I think, I'm healthcare focused, and in healthcare and in hospitals, you have to have these plans in place. And so it's a little bit different, but I do think that the commercial buildings are there's going to be, like I said, this bigger focus on how to keep the air quality good, how to, what to do if something like this happens again, that type of stuff. So I think there's a lot of those things that we're going to see. And as I mentioned, like with ventilation, we're definitely hearing a lot more questions about that. And our field has become a lot more exciting to people for whatever reason. So
Yeah, thanks, Cara. And Mariana did mention this, but we've been doing a COVID webinar series, of course, and filtration and ventilation and IAQ and all of that are things that have come up in that, and we'll continue it this summer post summit. Would any of our other panelists like to weigh in on this question about the pandemic and changes that you think might stick around for a while?
This is Mary. I can weigh in a little bit from a healthcare perspective.
Please.
I think one of the things, a couple things actually, and it sort of relates to the next question, what's the biggest focus for healthcare? It's really what we saw in the pandemic that we think is good and we're going to keep. I think that we're seeing remote work is definitely something that can stay, and that will reduce the number of buildings that we have, which will in turn reduce our carbon footprint. So I think that's one of the things that's definitely going to stay. I think telehealth has been accelerated through the pandemic, which I think has been really a great thing for both our providers and for our patients, that you can just have a remote appointment, reducing your carbon footprint by not driving to the building. If you think of everything that goes into seeing a patient from the time they arrive to the time they leave, and the amount of supplies that are used and the cleaning that has to go into that room after they leave, telehealth has been significant for us. So I think that's definitely something that's going to stay. So those are just a couple of things that have been fantastic. And then if I can just touch on what the biggest focus for healthcare is this year, it's really the pandemic and what things can we keep and what things are going to change. So we are masking now, and the CDC's recommendations are that healthcare continues to mask, right? And the other thing that we have seen is we have reduced the number of visitors in our facilities. So although there are some areas where we're using more energy because we have less people in our buildings, we're actually saving a significant amount of energy. So if we can sort of limit visitors, that's going to help us. So just my 2 cents on those two topics.
Yeah, and I can add the biggest focus on healthcare as well. Obviously, we're seeing, hospitals were impacted huge in terms of financial constraints. I think the AHA did a study in the middle of 2020 and estimated about $320 billion that they were going to be that they lost in revenue. So we've seen a huge push toward that, making up that revenue. I think that's great for energy efficiency because you can definitely make some ground, but again, energy is not a huge portion of the healthcare facility budget or healthcare total budget. So we see that as a big issue, as well as the codes and standards, as the Biden administration is working toward with the infrastructure bills and things like that. Deferred maintenance is an issue, just bringing hospitals back up to where they need to be, and then how to take that next step, and also make sure that the codes and standards we can follow according to CMS are brought up to date, because right now they're dependent on about 2010 technologies. So that was a lot, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Thanks, Cara. And actually, Kendall or Andrew, I'm not sure which you use behind the Slido, but you're going to go ahead and highlight that question, the third one down, about healthcare this year, since that's what we're leaning into is great, which is, so Kirby, I'll give you the opportunity if you'd also like to weigh in on that.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of things that we're looking at around what's our biggest focus, I mean, there's of course a lot of things that we have on our plate because there's never any one answer. It takes bringing multiple different aspects to the table to make sure that you're purely addressing all of those ESG, or in this case, probably most succinctly sustainability asks. The topics that have been raised already, things like IAQ, resilience, all come into fold. But the other things that I would just kind of make sure that everyone doesn't forget is that you need that solid foundation based on data to be able to help to drive these decisions. And so, really one of our biggest areas of focus is continuing to improve, augment, add to our use of data to help us make solid strategic decisions, whether that's data around our actual consumption and footprint and what we can do with it from there against our goals, or how do you integrate that data into the rest of your organization to be able to help drive decisions. So while you may not be the primary aspect of decisions, can you help influence them when you think about things like climate change and resiliency to help think about your siting and what you want to do around adaptation and climate change for your properties going forward?
Great, thanks so much, Kirby.
My pleasure.
So I will say for the next question about preventative maintenance, unless one of my DOE colleagues can correct me, I don't know the answer to this off the top of my head, but I'll say that my contact information and email will be at the very end of this presentation. So please, whoever wrote that, anonymous, please go ahead and email me and I'd be happy to follow up one-on-one. So with that, I'll actually hop down to the next one, which is what DEI efforts in BTO or DOE could another organization get involved with or replicate? So Nikita, I think that one's probably directed towards you.
Yeah, so a lot of it can be replicated. A few things I can talk about is have a point person on DEI, someone who is required to do DEI activities for your organization as part of their day job. That helps a lot because then that person is forced to think about it in their everyday work. You could look at your recruiting practices more closely and see where you're really missing the mark on reaching different demographics of people. Are you just recruiting through word of mouth? Then you're only going to be talking to people who you're used to talking all the time. So what else can you do? There are a lot of resources you can leverage out there through nonprofit organizations and trade associations, all of that. So it depends on your organization. You could create a safe space for your staff in the office, somewhere where they can come and talk about their concerns to their colleagues and just open up. And that gives you information about where you have challenges in your workplace. And then only then can you actually address them. Or you could even do this through surveys, anonymous surveys. Having regular discussions around DEI topics helps a lot. We have monthly discussions in the office around different topics. We've had about women and workplace issues, race, disabilities, STEM education, a lot of varying topics. So ask. More often than not, some of your colleagues already know about some of these issues and is ready to talk about it. So ask around and you could have a discussion around it. Kirby mentioned ERGs. So encourage your employees to join employee resource groups or create their own. Training, look at your training. Are you doing DEI-based training? And the last thing I'll mention is that you may not be an expert in DEI, but there are a ton of experts out there who can help. So if you have the budget for it, you don't need to try to figure this out on your own. Just go find someone who you can hire and who can help your organization combat these challenges and look at where the opportunities are.
Great, thank you so much. That's some wonderful advice. And I know as just a fellow staff person in BTO, having someone so deliberately, invested in this from a staffing perspective has made it feels like such a difference, at the very least in awareness, and hopefully also in long-term change. I think I'll go to the next one here, which is again back to our healthcare folks, which is the connection of public health and climate change. Is interesting. Is that philosophy accepted across the industry in healthcare? And I believe that Mary originally brought this up, but Cara is also, of course, connected to a broader healthcare. So if either of you would like to address it, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's definitely a connection between public health and climate change. In fact, I'll find it and drop it into the chat, but the CDC has a really good, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, who we rely on in healthcare, has a really good graphic that talks about the impact of climate change on human health. So very much so.
Yeah, and I would agree with Mary. I think that interest is also growing as it becomes a higher and higher priority. But there's definitely, we see it from our clinical folks, we see it from you know, all the different levels within the healthcare organizations that public health and climate change are coming and are emerging to the forefront. So I totally agree.
You know, and I'd like to throw in a little bit about what is driving that towards the healthcare industry. Climate Reality Project puts out a lot of information, but one piece of information is that over the next couple of decades, we could see upwards of 1.2, 1.3 billion climate refugees. If you look at, you know, south of the border, you know, a lot of the people are leaving, you know, that zone, not because they're looking for, quote, the better life. It's because there's such a severe drought, they can't grow crops, they can't feed anybody. We're seeing an increase or the increase in drought everywhere. So water scarcity becomes a problem. As the heat increases, it affects crop yield, but it also affects the nutrition value of those crops. So you won't be able to grow as much, and then what you can grow doesn't have the nutrition value. And in some places like North Carolina, where, you know, you're subject to a lot of pollen, you might see the pollen count increase by as much as 40 times. So people who are very sensitive to that, you know, will be very affected. And then finally, there are zones, so they're mostly in Africa now, but moving into India, that are considered uninhabitable just because of the heat. They get such a high amount of heat that you cannot survive it for any periods of time. So those are some of the things that we're going to see happening more and more. And that just starts driving more and more, you know, healthcare issues as we move along.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. I think it's a great point. So I will, this next question, I will go ahead and field myself, actually, which is, what's the best way to connect with DOE and get technical assistance? And I'm glad someone asked this, because I know a lot of the questions that haven't made it to these top ones do seem to be pretty specific and technical in their nature. So for those of you that aren't partners already, one of the best ways is just to connect through Better Buildings as a partner. So you can either do that, you know, right now through the Better Building Alliance, and I'm hopeful that one of my colleagues maybe will drop in the chat the Better Building Alliance join link. But that really gets you a part of the network. You know, you'll hear about more opportunities like Summit or other webinars, and also you can join one of our technology teams, the National Lab, to dig in deeper into something like building envelope or, you know, EMIS and a couple of other topics there. You also have the opportunity to join the Better Buildings Challenge, which is where you commit to a tangible goal of energy reduction of 20% over the next 10 years. And then we help with you a little bit more closely there, including a data reporting element. Cedar, since you work with our tech teams more closely, anything additional that I forgot on that or you'd like to add?
I dropped the links to join the Better Buildings Alliance in the chat, as well as the link to our tech teams with a whole bunch of resources online. And tomorrow during lunchtime, we do have a special event called Ask an Expert, where you can go chat one-on-one with some of our technical experts and get your questions answered.
Awesome, thanks, Cedar. So the next question I'll bump to you here, which is, can we share resources regarding building electrification? I will say that so right before this, I was with our low carbon pilot participants at a roundtable, and building electrification is, not surprisingly, really rising to the top with people that are exploring it, people that are facing challenges and barriers, you know, people that want to explore and share those solutions and all of that. You know, we do have a roundtable later today about electrification, and I think that you'll see, especially through the low carbon pilot, more resources coming out on that. But I will toss it to either my colleagues at DOE or any of the panelists. In particular, Alysson, I'm not sure if there are resources, if you can speak to anything of that with USGBC as well, but I'll throw it out to my other panelists in case there's something to add there.
Yeah, there's an organization in California called greenlining.org. And they have a pretty good paper out there on equitable electrification and some of the issues we're going to run into. Everybody talks about commercial buildings, but the bigger problem is probably going to be in the residential areas, because there's a lot of lower income housing where, you know, they're using gas furnaces, gas stoves, and they don't have the disposable income to replace those appliances with electric units. And until their costs come down, as well as we reach parity with natural gas and electric service for the same, whether it's heating or cooking, that's going to be an increasing problem. The city of Denver actually has a program ongoing right now. They've hired a consultant to develop strategic electrification plan for the city of Denver. It's targeting mostly the high-rise buildings, but it is expanding out into the residential areas as well.
Great, thanks, Dean.
Yeah, this is Allison. I think that building electrification, I think we have a lot of resources on our website, particularly educational resources with past webinars and past trainings, things like that. We don't have any specific advocacy briefs on building electrification. I know that's one of those things that's on my list to develop because it's become more and more of an issue, especially probably in the past like 5 years. So I would stay tuned for that. And once we have something, we'll post it to our website and we'll do a little article about it just so that it's publicized. But I do think that it's become more and more of a visible issue. So I would say stay tuned on that. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Allison. And with that, I think we've got a couple of conclusion slides here that'll wrap up our session. So I want to again just say thank you so much to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you being here today. We tried out something different to hear from these different perspectives on these top trends, and yeah, we just appreciate it. And this recording, as well as the slides that'll be at the end here, will be available on the Better Buildings Solution Center. So speaking of the Solution Center, we'll show a short video here, but as a reminder, the Better Buildings Solution Center has over 3,000 solutions to help you find proven and cost-effective strategies to help you reach your energy, water, and waste reduction goals. So if we can bring that up, let's check it out. And then we'll just have a couple of slides after that. Great, thanks. And if we could bring back up the slides, these are some of the resources that we mentioned. First and foremost, we want to just highlight a couple of other sessions that will be DEI related over Summit in case that's something that really piques your interest and you'd like to hear more from our partners about that. So these three are going on this week. And if you haven't signed up for it directly, every morning you'll get an email that has all of the links for that day. So it's not too late to join a session, even if you didn't originally register for it. On the next slide, I'd also like to share some additional resources from all of our partners here. These are some of the links we mentioned. And again, this slide will be available on our Better Buildings Solution Center along with the recording. So you can check this out, as well as some of the ones we've put in the chat, including the Good Interactive publication that just came out today in our Better Buildings Progress Report. Finally, to the next slide, please. Summit is not the end of your journey with us. We have a really great webinar series that'll be starting after Summit and go through this summer. So I think you'll probably see these topics that pique your interest, and I think a lot of the familiar faces and speakers and panelists. You can join this by going to the Better Buildings Solution Center and click on Events and Webinars. Finally, here's our contact information. So if we didn't get to your question or you'd like to reach out to one of our panelists, you can go ahead and do that. You can jot down our email now, or again, you'll have it in the recording. Additionally, we have launched a short feedback survey in Slido, and we ask that you please take a couple minutes to give us some feedback on this session. We really rely on your feedback to design webinars or future summits and more. The poll will be open till tomorrow, and it's anonymous, so your responses won't be visible to other attendees, unlike the other polls that we did in Slido today. And I believe that that link should be, one of my colleagues should be putting that in the chat or correcting me on this. Okay, well, if we get it up, it'll be available and open until tomorrow. So thank you so much again to our panelists. I hope to see you all at the opening plenary, which is right after this. Oh, the poll is live, someone's telling me. Wonderful. Yeah, I hope you'll join us for the opening plenary right after this, where you can hear from our partners and have a wonderful and happy 2021 Better Buildings Summit.